Welcome back to Highly Respected. I'm your host, Scott Greer. Today I'm joined again by the American dissident and Texas toast expert, Jacob C. Lloyd. Jake, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Scott. Great to be here.
That's terrific to hear, man. I love hearing that you're doing great. You know, everyone accuses you of being a Texas toast expert, but I'm not even sure if that's correct. But that's your new bio, so you're going to have to deal with it. Anyway, let's jump in. We got a ton of topics today, and a lot of them deal with the South. And Jake purports to be a Southerner, even though he's from Texas. So we'll see if he has some expertise on this. So let's jump in with our overall topic: the rough week for Southern culture. Not only are all their statues coming down, and I'm a Southerner myself, so it's my statues with the Confederacy or anybody associated with slavery. They're now going after core parts of contemporary Southern culture, namely NASCAR, college football, and Chick-fil-a. So this is like everything that like Southerners care about. You know, they love watching their NASCAR on Sunday, even though actually they're not able to get Chick-fil-a on a Sunday, unfortunately, because we're standing up for traditional values. But NASCAR is leading the field in this regard of cucking out to Black Lives Matter. The sport banned the Confederate flag and rallied around its one black star, Bubba Wallace, as he perpetuated a race hoax this week. Bubba said he found a noose in his garage at Talladega last weekend. The entire league gathered around Bubba as he cried over the terror of the noose. They even marched him out and had a one-car parade on the track for him this Monday. After an investigation conducted by 15 FBI agents, it was determined the noose was actually just a garage door puller. It was just a little rope there that it took 15 FBI agents to figure out what it was. Jake, are you at all surprised by this?
No, I wish that I could be. I guess, I would like to be surprised that a Southern institution like NASCAR, one of the crown jewels of our culture down here, I'd like to believe that we might be able to resist this a little bit longer, but I think that the institutions of power, the media, and the cultural army is strong enough that even an institution like NASCAR, which is so apolitical and so unreal, it's not like Apple or Amazon or one of these other companies that's right at the at the center of what's happening now, that even NASCAR has to kowtow to the liberal mob, as they say, and so I'm not at all surprised. I wish that I could be, but I'm not at all surprised by it.
Yeah, and NASCAR is actually one of the few really conservative entertainment institutions out there, especially among sports. Several drivers were okay with openly endorsing Trump. I think even in the Republican primary, not just in the general election of 2016, but in the GOP primary, if I remember correctly, like Bill Elliott, who was like a big star back in the 90s, and his son and a bunch of other drivers came up on stage with Trump at one of his primary events, and we're like, yeah, we're supporting Trump, which is a very risky move, especially in the 2016 primary. And they're totally okay with doing this. And even this year at the Daytona 500, they allowed Trump to have his lap around the track, and they gave him this warm welcome. The whole crowd was going crazy for him. And now, just because of the George Floyd unrest, they're going totally in for Black Lives Matter. And you have to remember, is NASCAR is 80% white, are their fan bases, and nearly all their drivers are white as well. As that's why Bubba Wallace is such a big deal, is because he's like their first prominent black race car driver who's like somewhat good. And the league is doing everything possible to comfort Bubba Wallace, because Bubba Wallace was the person who got them to ban the Confederate flag. He's like, this is hateful. This is racist. We need to stand with Black Lives Matter. So they got rid of a symbol that the vast majority of their fans love to fly or even don't have a problem with, just to appease somebody and to cultivate ties with a movement that most of its fan base hates. Like, I mean, I don't think any like diehard NASCAR fan, even the non-white ones, like Black Lives Matter.
I would doubt that even casual NASCAR fans have any love for Black Lives Matter. If you're the kind of person that, has any interest in NASCAR at all, just because of the demographic that it is, I doubt that they really have any care for it. What really disappointed me about it, like I said, I'm not really surprised that they, groveled before, the whole Black Lives Matter movement and everything. What did disappoint me was that how quickly they, there wasn't even any talk of like, we're so disappointed that this might have happened, or, we want to see what we want to wait for the investigation, anything like that. Even if they still did all the virtue signaling and everything, there was just this immediate acceptance among, within the NASCAR organization itself, as well as all of the commentators and the people, when you listen to them talking as they did that one car parade that you mentioned a minute ago, I don't remember who was speaking, but he was saying, he's like, this is so terrible. Like, I can't believe that somebody in the NASCAR organization, because he's talking about how they're close to the public, not everybody can get in. It had to be somebody from the inside, and how terrible it is that we have somebody inside of NASCAR that's a racist doing hate crimes against this black driver. There was zero.
It's the garage door. I cannot believe how all the garage doors of the KKK garage doors in NASCAR just hate black people so much.
Yeah, the garage door manufacturer is a front company for the KKK.
Yeah, Bubba Wallace was doubling down on this last night, even though he issued he's issuing a statement now saying like, oh, I guess I made a mistake. But you know what? We had such a show of unity that it was great anyway. Even though I lied. Bubba was either an idiot and had no idea what the normal rope pull, for a garage door was, or, he intentionally knew what it was and decided like, oh, I'll just make this a huge scandal. I'll up my reputation, I'll get more attention, and this will like make sure that NASCAR will do more of what I asked them to do. And it totally benefited him. And the whole sport looks like idiots now. The fact that they had to get 15 FBI agents to investigate, we're having nationwide rioting right now, and like statues are being pulled down left and right. And the priority for the FBI is investigating a garage rope pull thing at Talladega. This is like their top priority. But the worst response has definitely been from conservatives. Conservatives immediately believed Bubba's story. They were all like, this is despicable. These are, Nikki Haley was like, watch out, cowards. We're coming for you. The worst response was definitely,
watch out, racist. We're going to kill you.
Yeah, watch out. Like, we have a bigger army. It's like, wow, that's so brave. Like, you condemning racism. Like, very few people have the courage to condemn racism in the year of 2020. Thank you, Nikki Haley, for doing that. We really needed to hear that. But Ben Shapiro probably had the worst. He was like calling this despicable and outrageous, and they need swift punishment for whoever did this. And then he had a tweet when this all came out as a hoax. He's like, whoever could have predicted this? Like, he's snarkily tweeting this. And it's like, you fell for it. Like, you fell for it. And you're like, oh, who could have predicted this? It's like, apparently you were having problems predicting it. And all these conservatives then had to change their opinions. And they even were like, oh, I want to like Bubba Wallace so much, but his interview with Don Lemon, where he's doubling down on this in spite of all the evidence saying that it was just a garage puller. Like, I can't believe he would do this. And now conservatives, even though they were all jumping on him, calling him the new Jussie Smollett, when Bubba Wallace issued his, it wasn't an apology. He didn't say sorry. He just said, oh, I guess it was my fault. But it was a great moment. They're like, this is well said. Thank you, Bubba, for bringing us all together. I'm like, the dude hoaxed you guys, either out of stupidity or sheer malice, and you're just like thanking him.
Well, and even from what I saw, I saw a couple things, listened to a couple different clips, and the story seems a little bit different. So I'm not sure exactly what happened here. But he didn't even say, I'm sorry for mistaking this as, for a noose or whatever. Here, I'm sorry for reporting this before looking more into it. He said that when he was on Don Lemon's show, he said that the president of NASCAR came to him with tears in his eyes, knocked on his door, and he came in with tears in his eyes, and he described to him what they found. We found this noose, and I'm just so sorry that this has been done to you and my organization. And so he says that the president was the one that ever. And so that's it takes even, he's like, I didn't even see it until this was already reported. So, It's like, come on, dude, you got to pick one, because in other clips I heard him say, "I've seen the noose, and it is a noose." So
Yeah, in other clips, he was like saying that this is definitely. I knew what it was, and it was a noose, and it's like, come on, man, and like he can't even keep his story straight. But it's not like NASCAR is going to come down on him. They've already bent the knee. They've already decided that they support Black Lives Matter over Southern heritage, and this is the person that they want to make the face of the sport. I think this is going to have a major effect on their fan base, because they're basically telling their fan base that, like, you all are racists who would do something like this, and even if you didn't, we still need to lecture you about how racist you are, and ban your symbols from our events and everything like that. And they're just like, this is the new NASCAR, and the fans have to deal with it. I don't know why somebody who's like a longtime fan of NASCAR would just put up with this. And there's already resistance towards it. I mean, there were a lot of drivers, none of them that are huge names, were just like, this is stupid. Like, we're gonna, like, that they're banning Confederate flags. Like, I'm just going to leave the sport. When Bubba Wallace had a race like last weekend or a couple weekends ago, he drove a Black Lives Matter car, it's the most ridiculous thing ever. It looks like something out of a parody account that they created. Somebody drove a Blue Lives Matter race car at the same time as like a fuck you to Bubba. And I think at Talladega, somebody rented an airplane and flew a Confederate flag over the stadium. So the fan base is definitely not happy with this. It is the sport itself telling these people that we really think you're racist. We don't care about your support. We would rather get non-whites and minorities to watch our sport, even though they're never going to enjoy their sport. Like, as long as I've been alive, I've known that NASCAR has been trying to do minority outreach, and it's always failed. I remember in the 2000s, they were desperate. They got Reggie White, who's a famous NFL player, to come and help them with their diversity outreach. And even he at that time was complaining about Confederate flags, and he's like, when I see that, it's like a Jew seeing a swastika. And it's like, okay, this is who you want to hire for diversity outreach. And they've been so desperate with it. I mean, even with getting rappers to perform and like wear the NASCAR jackets and stuff. And it's not worked, and it's never going to work. It's a sport for rednecks. And that's what the sports culture is like. And by trying to change that, they're just going to lose their fans that they already have.
Right. And so I'm sure that the fan base feels very betrayed, because, the stereotype always has been that NASCAR is a sport for not just rednecks, but racists and bad people. And, it's like a Klan rally, that type of stuff. And now the very organization has turned against them and said, yes, that is true. Like, that's true. We're trying, we, the organization, want to fix it, but the people that follow this are bad people.
I don't know. And there's no clear. I mean, it's very similar to how the GOP will spend all its time calling its own base racist. They want to appeal to African Americans all the time, with just like, their whole messaging over the last month in response to George Floyd has apparently seen that blacks are the most important voters in America, and that they have to do everything possible to serve their interests, even if it means, making our cities less safe and destroying police departments and everything. In that regard, they'll do just to please this one demographic that goes 6 to 8% for the GOP. So I guess NASCAR is taking a few pages out of the GOP playbook, which I don't think it'll pay off well for them, but they're not the only sport going down this stupid route. College football, which is a huge thing in the Southeast, like everybody loves SEC football. It's a lot of these states, they don't have professional teams, so they all focus on the big state school team. And they're going all in for Black Lives Matter and having a ton of stupid controversies. Oklahoma State head coach Mike Gundy recently had to grovel for the sin of wearing a One America News t-shirt. This is the most horrifying thing ever. His team nearly almost threatened to boycott every game unless he apologized for it. And of course, he apologized for it and said how racist it was to wear a shirt that is the most boomer conservative outlet on planet Earth. University of Texas football players are threatening to not participate in any recruiting or fundraising events unless the school changes its so-called racist alma mater and do more for blacks. The SEC vows to host no events in the state of Mississippi unless it changes its Confederate state flag. Florida got rid of its Gator Bait chant because a few people claimed it was racist. Liberty University players are now transferring due to the school's association with Trump. Does this all signal the end of college football as we know it?
That's that question is probably a little bit over my head. I don't know. I think that the disconnect is kind of starting to come through because, like you said, college football is a big deal in the South. It's a huge deal here in Texas. The interstate rivalries, even the rivalry between UT and A&M and Texas Tech and OU across the border, it's a big deal. But so culturally, it's a big deal here in the South. It leans very conservative, but ultimately, these players are going to these universities, which are incredibly liberal, and they're being indoctrinated just like every other student is. In many cases, due to the demographic nature of the sport of football, you have a lot of African American, you have a lot of black players, some Hispanics depending on where you are, but so that lends itself to other issues. So I think that
most of these schools
with college football.
Now go on the demographics check. Nearly all the players of these schools, at least the starters, are black. Like I think University of Florida had no white starters last year. They had an all-black starting lineup, and yet their fan base is majority white. I mean, for all these SEC schools, their fan base are white conservatives. Yet all the players on the field are guys with like names like DeQuarius, and they have no love for the Confederacy, and they have really very little in common with their fans. And now they're starting to realize that, like, well, I want this team's culture to reflect what I'm into. I don't like these old racist songs. I don't like these chants that I feel like there must be something racist about them. I don't like these white frat boys like cheering me on and like, waving the state flag and everything like that. If they're in Mississippi, they want the college football culture to reflect more like their culture, which there's a huge discrepancy between college football culture and what the players are like. In the NFL, it's much more, there's a much more multicultural vibe among the NFL, but when it comes to college football, especially the ACC, really any of the schools, even schools in the Big Ten, which have like a slightly more liberal fan base, even then it's like a very white thing to be a fan of for college football. But they want to change this. They want that kind of multicultural atmosphere that they see in the NBA and NFL, which would dramatically change college football and would probably alienate a lot of the boosters and longtime fans of it.
Right. And so I think part of what causes this is the university culture seeping into the academic programs, because so number one, obviously we know, just as the stereotype goes, that black people tend to be good at these sports. It's more likely to find a black person good at football than a white person if you're, per capita. And then there's high concentrations of black people in the South around these universities. And the university has these diversity quotas where it's much easier and even encouraged for them to admit black people into the school. So you have a vastly disproportionate, the demographics are not proportionate to the regions in which they're in. And that starts the problem that you mentioned there, as far as the teams and the programs not at all reflecting the fan base that they're, that is supporting them. And I know a family there. They live here in Texas. I'm good friends with them. But they come from Alabama, and it's very funny. Anytime I'm over there for a holiday or just hanging out with them or whatever, and they've been drinking a little bit, a lot of times either somebody will turn it on or it'll come on a playlist. Dixieland Delight will come on, and Bama fans have this whole so that song already, but they have they're singing it, shouting it, dancing around to it, and then they've got these exclamations in between some of the lines, and like "Roll Tide" and all of the obnoxious stuff that Bama fans say. And it's like, can you imagine the like the players of this team understanding or relating to, maybe, I don't know, maybe they do that with that song just because it's like kind of a cultural thing, but they don't identify with that culture at all.
Exactly. I mean, they want something like maybe some like Public Enemy or NWA or something. They want that. I mean, that's traditional culture. It's not recent rap. It's old school rap. We want that. But that's really what they want. And with the University of Mississippi, they've already gone. I mean, University of Mississippi, Tommy Tuberville, who's running against Jeff Sessions, actually eliminated the Confederate flag from the stadium because it was like, oh, all these black players, I can't recruit them if they're seeing the rebel flag out there. And this was such a huge part of the University of Mississippi culture with the waving the flag. So first it was the Confederate flag, then they got rid of Colonel Reb in the 2000s, and everybody, that upset their fan base. And there was all these stickers at the time. If you went to an Ole Miss game, there was like, Colonel Reb is my mascot. They got rid of that. They turned the rebel into, I think, a land shark at first, and now he's a bear, or maybe it's a land shark and now a bear. I forget. They keep changing the mascot every few years, and then they banned playing the Dixie, and they were even arresting people for saying it. And now they're just going to get rid of the whole state flag just to get more black players to play at Ole Miss. And Ole Miss is not like that good of a program anymore, and it sucks. I mean, it's not. It has little to do with its Southern heritage reputation. And, for the fans, it's like it's a very traditional thing to go to these games. I mean, a lot of people, like, especially on the right, like to complain about sports ball and the opiate of the masses and all these dumb boobers. They need to wake up and stop watching college ball. But it's a way for them to connect to their families. They're like, my grandfather went to this school and he was like a huge Alabama fan, and he loved singing all these songs. And it connects a lot of people to a culture that's, outside of consumer culture. It's something that they're a part of, that they have traditions toward. Even though these universities are terrible, generally in regard, the big state Southern schools are not that bad compared to other places in the country, generally lean more conservative. Mizzou is one exception to that rule. So, and Texas A&M, as you mentioned earlier, has a very conservative culture. It loves the fact that it has a huge ROTC program, and they love having the cadets out participating in the chants and everything like that. And they probably want to change all these things to go with Texas A&M and get rid of the statues that are around the school that the players don't relate to. So they're bending their entire culture to these players. And I guess there's necessarily a point that if they don't, they're not going to have this talent. But at the same time, the schools change and, fundamentally change just to keep up their sports program, which is probably not going to be around much longer due to, in the state of Florida already passed a law where players can now profit off their likeness and that. They can now do that, which is going to cause many problems for schools and other programs as well throughout the country. There's also the problems with the injuries and CTE, and these things are going to slowly build up where the big college sports programs cannot exist as they once were. But all these schools are fine with getting rid of their alma mater, eliminating all these statues, changing the names of honors colleges and dormitories to get rid of racists, all just to please these players.
Yeah, I don't know how much longer any organization, whether it's a sports team or any organization which is not implicitly left wing, I don't know how much longer that can survive. And obviously, a lot of these organizations and companies cannot survive as left wing institutions. So we'll probably see, I would imagine, a culling of what our consumer culture landscape looks like in the very near future because of those two facts.
Yeah, and I think that anything that's outside of the traditional dictates of PC can't survive now. I mean, anything that, if there is any historical figure with a statue, we'll come back to this later on in the show. If there's any if there's any statute where that person may have said something that's not politically correct on race today, or sex, or gender, or anything like that, they can be canceled. They need to be taken down. And people were using these examples to argue for why Ulysses S. Grant should be taken down. They're like, oh, he one time owned a slave, thus we shouldn't honor him at all, forgetting primarily what his primary achievements were in our country. But we will return to that discussion in a moment. Now on to everyone's favorite chicken sandwich provider, Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A, which conservatives have loved and always said, this is the one institution that defies woke culture and appeals to real red-blooded conservatives, is now totally cucking to Black Lives Matter. The restaurant donated $5 million to Black advocacy groups, and its CEO, Dan Cathy, called upon white Christians to apologize for their racism. He expressed his apology by shining a black man's shoes on a TV show. He got down on both knees and was like, I gotta shine your shoes to show how sorry I am. So is Chick-fil-A also trying its hardest to alienate its core audience here?
Yeah, I think so, and I'm very disappointed, very, very disappointed in Chick-fil-A. There was a story a while back where Chick-fil-A decided that they were going to reverse some of their policies towards donating to certain charities that had ties to the LGBT movement. Conservatives were very upset about that. I think it turned out to not be so bad, but they ended up reversing the decision anyway. And so we were, mad at Chick-fil-A then. We're like, okay, well, maybe there's still some sense there, but I think there is no sense. And so the question becomes, what can we do about it? Because a lot of people have said, well, if, I'll always support Chick-fil-A, I'll vote with my dollar or, with my wallet or whatever. And, if they turned and did the stuff like everybody else, then I would boycott them too. But it's, what if we, if we boycott every place that gives in to the mob, that embraces woke culture, embraces anti-white racism, and bows down to Black Lives Matter, we wouldn't have anywhere to go. We would starve everywhere. Everywhere you look, this stuff is found. So, I mean, I don't know.
And I want to make a note that I cannot live without Chick-fil-A sauce. This is a price I cannot pay.
Right. Well, exactly. So it's on one hand, it's I don't want to stop going to Chick-fil-A just because of this. But then on the other hand, even because a lot of people would say, well, you're a cuck then for eating, cucked chicken. But it's dude, where, number one, it's not like boycotting will do anything. And number two, where could I go that I'm not going to be eating cucked chicken or what? I mean, Popeye's chicken, is Popeyes going to be more racially friendly to me?
I want to defend Applebee's. Applebee's has not released any statement in support of Black Lives Matter. They're just continuing to tweet about their great drink deals and how you can get their terrific fajitas and everything like that. So Applebee's is staying winning. Unlike Chick-fil-A, they're not donating millions of dollars to Black Lives Matter. But it's boycotts aren't going to work, because anytime that a boycott happened and be racists are boycotting Chick-fil-A, Chick-fil-A would almost pay racists or supposed racists to boycott them so they can get that free press. And then liberals will be like, oh, we thought these were terrible homophobes who just want all Christians, or actually all gays, to die. But racists hate them, so I must like Chick-fil-A now. And they would pay for that type of publicity. It's the right doesn't really have the power to boycott, because one, the people who the media celebrates it, they portray this as a great thing, as this company's doing it right by these conservatives boycotting. Generally, conservatives don't like the idea of boycotts unless it's something that really makes them mad. But even then, I can't think of one successful conservative boycott attempt. Think about Nike. Nike's sales went up when it made Colin Kaepernick one of its spokesmen. That didn't work. There's been so many companies who have just tweeted anti-Trump things and said statements we totally oppose Trump. There's been no punishment at their profit line or in their stocks. And there's this common phrase where it's go woke, get broke. Or I think I might have I actually messed it up. It's actually get woke, go broke. But get woke, go broke. And like you always see boomer cons and like MAGA types always tweeting this, and they have like really no examples. It's like Nike went woke. They definitely did not go broke. Every corporation has followed this path. I mean, even with the Black Lives Matter thing, is like nearly every big corporation, with the exception of Applebee's, released a Black Lives Matter statement and saying we're donating to racial advocacy causes. And there's been no punishment to them. I mean, people have nowhere to choose. It's like every restaurant that they could go to is saying the same thing as Chick-fil-A. Every big tech company is saying the same thing. Every corporation that they would possibly buy from is saying the same thing. So you can almost not really punish Chick-fil-A for going along with the flow. And there's not necessarily like an alternative, unless they want to, eat at Applebee's, as I said. Maybe Chili's. I don't know. I don't know if Chili's has expressed its support for Black Lives Matter. And of course, Popeyes and everybody else definitely had to make sure that they showed support for Black Lives Matter. But it's not even just these corporations. Is that Dan Cathy was representing what most every Christian institution was saying. He wasn't saying anything different. I mean, the leader of the Southern Baptist Convention, which is the largest and most powerful Protestant denomination in the country, said he stands with Black Lives Matter and whites must atone for racism. The Vatican said the same thing and even said that George Floyd is a just man. So there's not even any Christian institution that's saying anything differently from what Dan Cathy is doing. Dan Cathy is merely expressing what Christian institutions and corporate America is saying about the recent unrest.
Right. And you kind of touched on this a minute ago when you said that, you can't really blame Chick-fil-A for going along with this type of stuff. And, it's because there are two groups attempting to apply social pressure to Chick-fil-A over this decision right now on this issue. And one group is saying, we'll boycott you. And even with the boycott, it's largely toothless. Like nothing will actually happen. Most people cannot live without their Chick-fil-A sauce, so they will not actually boycott it. Or maybe they will for a week, so nothing will actually happen.
Chick-fil-A still has a Christian reputation, which is different from other companies.
Right.
I mean, they still like to hire evangelical Christians, and they still have a kind of nice Southern conservative culture around the company where it's like everyone says thank you and sir and ma'am, and people still like that culture. So they're not going to resist.
They're not going to suffer in the same way. And and so even if the boycott did have some teeth to it, on one end you have the boycott saying don't do this, and then on the other side you have mobs of people who will literally burn down stores because they you hurt their feelings. So I mean, which one makes the most business sense? Which side should you go with, just from a purely pragmatic perspective? So
it's almost like paying protection money. It's like, here, please don't call us racist. I mean, Black Lives Matter might be the most successful organized crime outfit in human history. I mean, they've extorted every company into giving them money and doing what they say. I mean, the mafia would definitely envy their tactics. And even poor Wendy's, which released a statement in support of Black Lives Matter and donations, and I think a $500,000 donation to some cause affiliated with it. They had their franchise in Atlanta burned down because that's where the noble Rayshard Brooks met his end. And thus, because Rayshard, they called the cops on Rayshard Brooks being passed out drunk in the middle of their drive-through, they had to suffer for it. And Wendy's, of course, didn't release any statement. I mean, this is just the cost of doing business in America now, that you have to pay them off. Hope they don't call you racist. And when they destroy your business and your local franchises, you just have to say, oh, well, I guess we'll have insurance money. This is the cost of doing business. And, going separate from corporations is that with these Christian institutions, they're also experiencing similar levels of intimidation and destruction from them. You saw in San Francisco last weekend that the Junipero Serra statue was taken down, and he was one of the great Christian missionaries to California. He proselytized millions, or rather his proselytism led to the conversion of millions of people eventually. And he was a great figure in Christian history and a great figure in American history. And yet they tore him down and like, yay, we got him, because they see Christianity as a outgrowth of European civilization that they have to really fundamentally change, which now we're even seeing with Sean King saying we got to get rid of all images of white Jesus because this is an affront to non-whites, that this is terrible, that this is white supremacy, that we see images of white Jesus. You have to get rid of that. You have to get rid of all this imagery that shows white people connected to Christianity, that they have to now be more diverse. They have to look like a Sunday morning or Saturday morning cartoon show in the year of 2020, that they have like a whole diverse group of people coming together. It has to be, Hispanic, Asian, Black, transgender, gay. They have everybody together, and this is all one big happy Christian family. And just sewing a bunch of white people together is outrageous, and you have to change that. And most of these Christian institutions are bowing down to it. They don't really care that these groups are vandalizing in the church across the street from the White House, the St. John's Church. They don't care that they're tearing down, great Christian figures who are responsible for the North American continent becoming Christian. They just don't care about it. They just like with corporations, they want corporations to follow their own line, and they can do this against Christianity, and they're having the same level of success.
Yeah. It's whether it's corporations or these religious organizations, any of this, it's all perfectly represented, I think. When you were describing to me about how, they have to donate and pay this protection money, put out statements in support of this, and then when they get their stores burned down, they have to just keep their mouth shut and hope it doesn't happen again. It's just like the video of the guy getting his ass kicked in Macy's. He didn't do he did nothing. He did nothing to this black guy. He just apparently looked at him wrong, according to the black guy. First he said that he called him the N-word, but then it turns out that didn't happen, of course. And so not only is he getting slapped around, he's getting punched and kicked on the ground, and he's getting called derogatory names and stuff. Not only is he just laying there taking it, he's apologizing while he's getting beaten for nothing, for nothing other than
it's not helping him.
White.
Like the black guy is standing over him, is enjoying it. He loves the fact that he's apologizing and groveling, and that's encouraging his violence toward him because he sees as a weak prey who has no ability to resist him, who has no will or no ability to resist him. And everyone who was watching that video, when that video first went viral, most of the commentary in the retweets and replies were all positive. They're like, I love watching this racist squirm. I love it. This is awesome. Like, this is great that we're really hitting back at evil white people. Even though any sensible person who saw that was like, this is clearly a case of black aggression for no good reason. He just made up that he heard a racial slur. They always claim this, that they heard a racial slur or saw news or anything like this, and this drove him to instinct. Like the brother of the attacker said that, like, oh, his instinct just kicked in when he heard the N-word, and he had to attack him. Like he's not responsible for it because it was just pure instinct. Like he turned into the Incredible Hulk, and he couldn't control himself. And the guy, even like in the story, he was like, they were sort of admitting that he was stealing a shirt. He's like, oh, he tried on a shirt without buying it. And was like mocking the guy, the Macy's worker. And I guess the Macy's worker was like confused by what was going on. So they decided that was an excuse to assault him. And there, even with this, we saw this similar story where the black guy in San Francisco followed a woman home to humiliate her for cutting him off in traffic. And this woman was so terrified because she knows the cost of what happened by these viral videos. She's going to lose her job. She'll lose her house. She's going to get death threats. Everyone's going to hate her. The whole world's going to know her and laugh at her. Like her whole life is ruined. And she's over there cowering in fear, like screaming, like, please don't do this. Please don't do this. And all the black guy can say is like, okay, Karen, are you okay, Karen? Well, I'm going to teach you a lesson, Karen. And it's a way of just showing their power that they have over ordinary whites. Like this is a fundamental change in society, that what happened to the San Francisco Karen, which like shows why we should never use the term Karen, because it is an anti-white term used to abuse middle-aged white women who just give a shit. That's like the fact of the matter, is that if you like notice people loitering around your street, or they might be up to suspicious behavior, and you either confront them or call the police, you're a Karen. And if you don't want to be a Karen, you should shut up and just mind your own business and just like let blacks and non-whites walk all over you. That's what the point of Karen is to do. It's to intimidate whites and to
Right.
It's to undermine like traditional white behaviors about like trying to protect your neighborhood or community or town by like saying like, hey, you have to pay for your items, or like, hey, you can't steal, you can't be in a handicapped parking spot. Like, okay, Karen, like, let me get out my video and show how racist you are for telling me this.
Right.
And
even in the video, his whole thing evolved in the video. Like you were saying, that she knows that this is done to ruin her life. He knows, because initially he was just saying, you cut me off in traffic, and then it was like, you cut me off and you flipped me off too, which, get over it, dude. Grow up. Who cares? Grow up. Even if that were true, which of course it's not. And then I think people were starting to look, because there were people on the street, and then like, this is halfway through the video, and he decides, oh, she also called me the N-word, when people are starting to look. And so, it's just, it doesn't matter. Yeah, Karen is an
people automatically believe it too, and there's been so many hoaxes that it doesn't matter how many hoaxes are exposed. Instinctively, liberals will believe it. It's like, this person called me the N-word, and they're like, really? And it's like, you can do your worst to that person. Like, you can just like stab that person to death on the street, and people would like applaud. Like good, like little white liberals will applaud like seals if that happened. And now with that woman, when he made that accusation, she realized like her life is over, and like she has no way of defending herself. Even if that's not the truth, like it's done. Like that truth can emerge like a month later, and nobody's going to care. Like your name's already plastered all over the place, and people have already issued you death threats. You've already lost your job, and like ruined relationships, and those can't be recovered. It doesn't matter what the truth is.
He put her license plate and her address in the video. He showed where she lived and everything, like telling people to go. I mean, whatever anybody would want to say. I mean, we all know that that's like, come here and kill her, basically.
Yeah, and it's doxing that is given, that the elites approve of. Even though this woman was a liberal woman herself, and she was like saying, I have a black husband in order to save herself. That was like not good enough. Like they don't care. Like this, they'll use it against themselves. I mean, it's the same with like the Stalin's purges of the 30s. Like they saw their comrades, getting shipped off to the gulag or executed, and they knew that like, well, like as long as it's not happening to me, it's good, and I still approve of it. As the same, all these cultural revolutions, it'll eventually come for many of its proponents and supporters, and that won't change the supporters and proponents' opinion of it. They still think it's a good thing that's happening, and they know if they oppose it that they'll be on the receiving end of the violence and harassment. So they don't want that to happen. And what happened to this woman is what can happen to any ordinary white in this country if you upset a non-white. And same with the Macy's. Like you can get beaten up. You can have your personal address put out there for all the public to find out, and you can have year-long harassment and intimidation campaign against you just for upsetting non-whites. And every non-white in this country, particularly black people, realizes that they have this power, and they're going to wield it and use it to a tremendous degree for the future to come. And we were already seeing this, a few months ago with all these like white teenagers. I've talked about this previously on podcasts, is they were talking about these white teenagers who would say some mildly offensive thing on TikTok, which is the nature of TikTok and nature of teen culture for aeons. And like black people would always like put this person's up like, hey, we need to find this person. They find him. He's like some 16-year-old. And not only is he's getting expelled from school, he's getting his college admissions revoked. His parents are potentially losing their jobs. And this is all warranted because like the kid, like it could be something minor. Like he mocked like blacks, like getting arrested or something like that. And that's enough to ruin people's lives. And this is the America of 2020, and this is what we have to live with now.
Yep. Yeah, it's terrible, especially seeing it done to these kids because I mean, it's like they don't even do anything deserve. It's not even like they're saying the N-word or anything like that.
It's like kids do stupid stuff. Like even if they say like a slur or stuff, they're like 16. Like, what do you think 16-year-olds were doing like 20 years ago? Like they're doing the exact same things. They were saying racial slurs, are doing something else stupid, like committing like some petty crime or causing some type of destruction. It's like teenagers have always been like this. What do you think they are? But like they don't actually, they'll be fine with you committing destruction and crimes as long as you're not using a racial slur. And even with our culture, which it wants so much forgiveness for crack dealers and teenage criminals who committed serious assaults and serious felonies, we have to forgive these people. And even murderers we have to forgive. But we cannot forgive some white 16-year-old who may have said like a racial slur on a TikTok video. There's no forgiveness for that. And you have to have your life ruined. Like, there is a greater punishment for someone like that, or by social opprobrium towards that person, than a murderer in many ways. All right. Well, we've been talking so much negative stuff. It's time to talk about something positive that's happened this week. President Trump actually did something good for once. It's like, it's a miracle that's happened. You know, he's been potato Trump for so long. He's been impotently tweeting about law and order and everything like that. But he finally did something good. And not many people are paying attention to it. This week, he extended his temporary immigration moratorium to cover the entire year and expanded it to prohibit most guest workers from entering the country. It's supposed to protect over 500,000 American jobs and will significantly curtail immigration for not just only this year, but for a long time coming. This is a terrific move. This is one of the biggest, most positive developments in immigration policy in the last 50 years. But no one is really talking about it. I'm seeing very few people on right-wing Twitter talk about it. I'm seeing very few people in the media talking about it. The media reason why they're not talking about it may be because at least 65% of Americans support this due to the most recent polling. So they don't want to give Trump a win. They never want to give Trump a win. So why do you think that people are just not going apoplectic in excitement over this development?
So people are very frustrated with Trump, and I think that they're a little bit they don't want to jump too quickly to being excited about anything he does.
Unfortunately, Jake got cut off there a little bit, but what I think, he was like saying that unfortunately a lot of the listeners didn't get to hear is that he's saying that a lot of people are so upset with Trump with his weak response to the riots and he's just seeming like a buffoon, that they don't really want to go like 2016 style level support for Trump at this moment. They're just so mad at what he's doing that they don't really want to give him a win. And also the media wasn't really talking about this. The whole focus of our country right now is the unrest dealing with George Floyd's death and Black Lives Matter and these protest movements that don't have much to do with immigration, even though they're all connected and by the changing demographics of America and the cultural transformation of America. They're primarily focused on police attacks and people cutting them off in traffic and everything and stuff like that. They're not really wanting to talk about immigration at this point. It is a little surprising that they're not Democratic politicians and all the liberal journalists aren't just going like, oh, this proves that Trump is a fascist. This is his Nazi plan coming to full fruition. We have to do something to stop him. Like, we cannot let this occur. There's not really much protest, and I don't see anyone complaining that much. There's been a few people, tweet about it when he issued it Monday evening. But outside of that, you haven't really seen much criticism of the order. Compared even when he introduced it in April. In April, when he introduced it, they were like saying, this is to make America white again. This is a Nazi policy. They're going into their usual hysterics about this order. Now it's been muted, and they paid attention to it for maybe 30 minutes on Monday, and they've moved on from it. So Jake, do you think that they'll return to their focus on this issue of immigration on his executive order? I mean, pretty much most immigration is halted for the entirety of 2020. Do you think they're going to notice it at some point?
I think that it's wholly dependent upon how long the riots and the protests and the social outrage continues, as well as how long Trump remains weak on that. Everything the media does is done to serve the purpose of not only making Trump bad and trying to make sure that he's not reelected, but also to make Trump supporters, us, look bad, so that our ideas continue to be snubbed and pushed out of the public conversation. So whatever can be used best for that purpose is what will be used. And I think that right now, what is what is best. They know that Trump's response is not great for us. We're not super happy about it, and they know that the social outrage, the racial tensions rising, and the protests and riots and everything, all of that continuing does worse for Trump than it would to divert attention away from those things to talk about his immigration policy. Now, as soon as all of this stuff dies down, we very well could see them start to discuss this, start to talk about this, and outrage over how businesses are being punished and how we need these workers and we haven't had them for however many months it's been at the point they decided to talk about it.
Yeah, no, what you're saying is the people who are most upset about this are like Chamber of Commerce types. They were the ones like the most horrified. It wasn't the typical Democrats and liberals who were saying stuff about this. Like the Chamber of Commerce came out with a strong denunciation of this. Big tech companies were coming out with condemnations of this. And Lindsey Graham like had a whole Twitter thread about how mass immigration is the foundation of American prosperity and we can't do anything to limit it. And these guest workers are creating jobs, not taking jobs. And all this pablum that is stupid and anyone who with half a brain will realize is just lies. Like they are taking American jobs and it doesn't benefit our economy when we have over 40 million unemployed to keep bringing in high skilled, cheap labor to take jobs that millions of Americans wish they could have an opportunity at. And so Trump is clearly on the winning side of this angle. I mean, 65% of Americans, as I was saying before, at least 65% of Americans. In some polls, it's almost 80% of Americans support a temporary immigration moratorium. And as we see unemployment continue to remain high, you're going to continue to see this level of support for this idea. People do not want to be competing against cheap foreign labor at a time when they don't know how to put food on their table or how they're going to pay rent. They want any job that will come their way. They don't care what job it is. They just want a job where they can help support themselves. And continuing to allow corporations to bring in cheap labor at a time like this is terrible optics and would be terrible for Trump to allow. And Trump is clearly in the right here. And this is going to be a popular issue for him to campaign on. As long as he remembers it. He unfortunately didn't bring it up at his Tulsa rally, but maybe he will at future rallies. One can hope. Time now for the patron mailbag. You, the humble listener, can also get the power to ask questions like a super chatter if you sign up for the patron level at the highly respected Patreon page. The Patreon URL is patreon.com/highly respected. This question comes from Matt Eckert, and it asks, is accelerationism cringe and blue-pilled? I wouldn't necessarily say it's cringe and blue-pilled. It's not necessarily what we want. Like a lot of times, like the key part of accelerationism is the worse, the better. Right now, we're seeing the worst we can possibly imagine. I mean, people are tearing down American statues everywhere. You're seeing levels of crime and disorder arise at a level that we haven't seen in a very long time. You're seeing threats to public order. You're seeing anarchy, chaos. Everything that could possibly be an accelerationist mood is happening right now on the streets. And people are bummed out about it. A lot of the people who are the most accelerationists, like burn everything to the ground, aren't really enthusiastic right now because they're seeing like, oh, wow, a lot of people will just accept this. They won't actually wake up. They won't actually do anything. Our government and everyone's on their side. And people are just getting blackpilled in response to this. They're not having the positive reaction that a lot of accelerationists think will happen when we have these events where the worst happens and people wake up and there's an equally extreme reaction to what they're seeing happen around them. So we're not, in some ways you want I don't want to say, maybe you can call it a mild accelerationism, and that people do need to see the ugly side of the type of multicultural society that occurs. They can't hide from it. A lot of especially white liberals have insulated themselves from all the negative effects. Like they send their kids to private schools where they don't have to interact with the diversity. They live in a neighborhood that's so expensive that no non-white can ever hope to live there. and they build their own little enclaves, and then they celebrate Black Lives Matter. They put out hate doesn't live here. A lot of these people need to experience the level of crime and disorder that occurred in the 80s and 90s to really change their opinions. Maybe even in that case, they wouldn't do this, as we're seeing right now in nearly every American city. So accelerationism as a strategy doesn't necessarily work, because most of the time the worse is worse, and people will accept the most unimaginable things. Like 20 years ago, like you couldn't see people like saying like, yes, I want drag queens reading Hey Arthur books to my kids. Like now all these schools are having drag queen story hour. They wouldn't want their kids taught about gay and transgender issues in second grade. Now they're having to deal with that. They would be horrified that people would dare take down George Washington statues or Abraham Lincoln statues or Ulysses S. Grant statues, and now that's happening. So the accelerationism is already occurring. It's not having the effect that accelerationists want. And a lot of people are going into these ideas about secession and stuff like that, but there's not really, you're not seeing people move away from the system. They're nodding their head and they're accepting it, which is a very blackpilling experience. Unfortunately, poor Jake's still having issues with his microphone. It sounds like I'm talking to R2D2. So we'll keep him till the end, but hopefully he gets the mic situation corrected soon so we can hear more of his takes. We love to hear Jacob C. Lloyd's takes. We've got one second and final question. This comes from Mr. Anonymous. It asks, what's the least offensive statue that will ultimately be toppled? We've seen progressive hero Teddy Roosevelt go down. Who's next? Albert Einstein, JFK, Bill Clinton? Well, we've already seen this. There's two examples. The 54th Massachusetts Regiment, which was an all-black regiment that fought in the Civil War. It had white officers. If you've seen the movie Glory, it's about them. Their memorial in Boston was vandalized during the riots. And just recently this week, an abolitionist in Madison, Wisconsin, Christian Haig, was torn down and dragged across the street. There was also a suffragette statue in Madison, Wisconsin that was also torn down. There's hard to say like how you can say that like some abolitionist and a suffragette are connected with Confederates or what their offense would be. Even with this Haig guy, if they want to defend it, he had writings about having black servants where he treated them like slaves and he used racial epithets for them. So they could make the example where they're like, or statement like, oh, well, you say this guy is good, but he said the N-word in his writings. Like, how dare we have a statue to him? And they were even using this example for Ulysses S. Grant, where his main contribution, as I said earlier, was winning a war that ultimately ended slavery. They're saying like, well, the fact that he owned a slave and he was an Indian fighter, that we can't honor him, that we have to tear down his statues. So we have to tear down one of the people who's responsible for emancipation, along with Abraham Lincoln. With the protesters, I think that there is no limit. I think all the people that are mentioned, Albert Einstein, JFK, Bill Clinton, they could all have their statues torn down if the protesters target it. It doesn't matter about their political beliefs. It's targeting whites in general. They do not want to acknowledge a country that was once majority white, that saw itself as largely a white country, and they want to tear down any vestiges of it. Doesn't matter if you're an abolitionist or a Confederate, white supremacist, or somebody who supported the Civil Rights Act of the 1960s, you are fit to be taken down. So as long as you're a white guy in what appears to be 19th century or old 20th century garb, you could be taken down because they don't want to have any white symbols around. The only people who are safe, even though the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, is one exception, is statues that are dedicated to non-whites that shows them in a 100% positive light. Now, the statues that the authorities will take down that the least offensive are going to be the Abraham Lincoln emancipation statues in Boston, D.C. You would think, like, why would they want to take down statues that celebrate the end of slavery? Well, in both these statues, it has a black person prostrate. thanking Lincoln as the great white savior. And racial activists really hate the white savior trope. So they want to take this down. Protesters in D.C., by the time you may have listened to this, they may have already taken it down, threatened to take down the Lincoln statue this week. And the whole crowd cheered at the idea. So emancipation statues will probably be the ones of the most ridiculous that the authorities will eventually take down. In Boston, they're considering this idea. So there is no necessarily limit to where they may go, as long as they can claim this person represents white America. They will tear him down. Doesn't matter what their political views are or what they did in the Civil War. They are all on the same equal plane as Confederates, which proves any person who claims they'll just stay with Confederates or Columbus is a complete moron. The slippery slope is already here. We're already sliding down it. We're going down. There is no end in sight. And you have to just say no to the defacement and the abolition of Confederate statues if you want to preserve our history. Because if you give them one, they're going to come after everything. And they're literally coming after everything. So you have to use force against them. You have to say no more statues or no more statue destruction. We're going to protect our history. We don't care what you think about it. Tough luck. This is America. This is our country. And if you don't like it, you can leave. And hopefully somebody comes up and says that statement. We really haven't seen it from anybody, but maybe that message will come. And now that's all the time we have. We thank Jacob for coming on, even though he had some mic difficulties. Let's see if he's still around. Jake, how can people help find you and help support you?
So thanks again, Scott, for having me on. Hopefully my mic is okay doing this.
Fortunately, I think he had some more issues. All right, well, we lost Jake again, but you can listen to his show, or watch his show rather, American Dissident. It's Monday through Fridays, and it's on D Live, and you can watch it on D Live. He also is on Twitter at Jacob C. Lloyd. So please give Jake a follow. We appreciate him coming on. Sorry, and it's too bad about his mic troubles, but when he comes on again, we'll have that fixed out. So anyway, thank you, Jake, for coming on. And until next time, stay respected.